in a hypothetical colloquy with you that...
No, I understand. This is obviously I have a motive in trying to raise the question, because it seems to me that if you were able to assert here that you have a time deadline and you feel, compelled to make a decision, even so you don't have all the information, you could, in fact, color the record by saying, if we had more time, perhaps we could make a decision, but we haven't been able to get an extension approved by the applicant.
Yeah, I don't want to be engaged in
do that?
semantics, and I really don't want to get down this road, but the Board of Appeals, and I don't want to play games and pick on your words, but the Board of Appeals has no intention of coloring the record on anything here. What we intend to do is we intend to decide this case based upon the evidence presented to us using our best judgment. And I'm not an expert on environmental law, but if the Concom does not have its report ready by the 19th, we're going to end the evidence here, whether that means we can take judicial notice of what they do. But in any event, the applicant is going to be required to fulfill the order of conditions of the Conservation Commission here, separate and independent of whatever judgments we make. And so, therefore, I'm not sure that ask my colleagues if necessary, but I don't think it presently is. I don't know that it's indispensable that we have the Conservation Commission report in hand by the time we vote on this. I guess it would be helpful. It certainly would be interesting. But we're not going to be deciding this case based upon principles it's set forth in the Conservation Commission rules and the state wetlands regulations and act, which is within their exclusive jurisdiction.
There are two jurisdictions, I understand that. They are affecting each other, but I'm not looking to engage in a debate other than to say that I know, and I don't think it's a secret, that the decision that's made by you is probably going to be appealed to the Housing Appeals Committee, and I'm just trying to...
I think our decision, I would tend to think our decision, no matter what we decide, is going to be appealed somewhere, and whether it's to the Housing Appeals Committee or elsewhere, I leave to others.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Good. Thanks, Mr. Mullins. Good to talk to you again. Thank you for coming. Is there anybody else present this evening? Ms. O'Donnell, do you want to be heard? And then we'll go to the young lady in the back. No, that's... Oh, no, I think she's... No, come on.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. I just wanted to, first of all, apologize for being late. But secondly, to just point out that the town has several issues, not in order of importance, that have come out as a result of this, the hearing process. And I mention these matters for the benefit of the developer's attorney so that they know that these are issues that could be addressed by the time we have the next hearing. Firstly would be the access to the site. It is the strong contention of the town that the access is too narrow. It seems to have been designed to avoid going to a MEPA filing, and the idea that the sole means of egress and access out and in and out of the building, out of these buildings, would be limited because of a desire to avoid another permitting level doesn't seem to be justified. So we would be looking, as many of the peer reviewers have mentioned, that a boulevard design with a left turn access would be preferable and safer. I will be discussing the issues with the school bus company as soon as I can get a contact information for the school bus to find out what their requirements would be for entrance and for bus stops and pickup and delivery of children back and forth from that site. Secondly, we understand that, as Mr. Mullins has mentioned, that a hydrological study has been suggested. We believe that the wetlands crossing, the culvert, is going to be an issue. At the present design, it's only 10 feet wide, and we have some concern about the fact that the flow of water through that culvert will result in flooding downstream. We don't have enough information on that, but that's a hydrological study has been something that's been discussed. Perhaps that's something that's going to be covered by the Conservation Commission. We would strongly encourage the board to include a condition that would not allow any encroachments into the 25-foot buffer zone. There's a waiver that has been requested. Actually, that's the only waiver that has been requested from this board of the conservation bylaw. And we would.
I think that's the only thing within our jurisdiction. That's probably why.
Well, they could have submitted a whole list of things, but that's the only one that they've asked for.
Yes, that's true.
The applicant has proposed putting stormwater under the buildings, which is highly unusual. I'm not even sure you can finance buildings with the stormwater underneath the parking and the rest of the building. So we would encourage some consideration about, or some demonstration from the applicant that that's a design that's actually going to be sustainable. We have a concern about the access for repair and for maintenance of that stormwater system if it's underneath the parking and underneath, 3 levels of apartments. And then we, given this last winter, of course, everybody's concerned about snow storage. And we're not quite sure where they're going to plan on putting that. Maybe they think that it won't ever snow again, but, I'm not quite sure whether that's the case. The snow storage at this point we think is very inadequate, and not really sure where they're planning on putting that. In addition to the access, the width of the roadway, we had made this comment before, and the applicant's engineer said, well, he would just make the sidewalks narrower. Well, we know that in the application, as many people have pointed out, they did talk about this as being a smart growth design and walking and all that sort of stuff. But even their own traffic engineer said that would be unlikely. But it seems a sidewalk that's only 4 feet wide and only one sidewalk is really not adequate. So we would want to see 2 sidewalks, and we want them to be 5 feet wide so they can be plowed. We understand that the applicant was going to be doing a gap study. As people have mentioned, other people today have mentioned the fact that the traffic study was done in February under a snow emergency. We don't think that the information that has been provided on the traffic study has been adequate. And so we understood that the applicant was going to be providing that gap study, but nobody has seen that yet.
Right, I anticipate that may be at the June 3rd hearing.
Right, and
certainly
as I
hope it
said,
is.
I'm just providing this as sort of a little checklist to the applicant so that they know what we would expect to see at the next before the close of the hearing. And then just as, as a final point, the density on this site, I've done affordable housing, all kinds of places in Massachusetts for years, and worked on lots of 40B projects. There's lots of discussion about the fact that it's 6.6 acres, but in fact, there's 3.3 that are usable. The rest of them are soaking wet. So in my estimation, that would get 90 units on 3.5 acres at the most, is something like 27 units an acre, which is a lot higher than density that normally would apply for these kinds of projects. So I just wanted to point that out for the board. And I will ask the fire chief if he would be willing to provide something in writing, if you'd like.
That's fine. I mean, we'll accept whatever the chief wants to do. If he thinks his oral testimony was adequate, that's fine. I don't know what he has planned for the next couple of weeks, but would welcome anything he wants to submit.
Okay, well, I'll ask.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Yes, ma'am. Hello.
My name is Pat Boyd. I'm a lifelong resident.
I'm sorry, Pat Boyd, B-O-Y-D?
B-O-Y-D.
And where do you live, Miss Boyd?
22 Wildwood Road. One thing that people haven't mentioned, and I've noticed living in my house over the years, it's like going through a time capsule. I've watched trees come and go. I've watched neighbors come and go. I've watched fences come and go. And the one thing that I'm thinking about, see, right now, on Wildwood Road, we've gone through a couple of years' worth of zoning for the new hospice that's being built. And so, I lived through the construction, the noisy summers, the lights that are on all night, because they look right into my room, my bedroom window, during the construction. And one thing that I have to say, I've been kind of blessed because my daughter works for Seasons Hospice, so we've had a strong voice in how it looks and how it impacts on the neighborhood. one thing that I asked them for was to keep the canopy of trees, that we've had there, because St. Elizabeth's was there all the time, and as we know, St. Elizabeth's, the rectory, was kind of getting under disrepair, and we never had to notice it because the trees were there. My concern with this huge building, now I don't know about the wetlands, but I do know about the lack of light on nature. And it seems to me wetlands need trees to ground the water. And if you have a huge building, it's going to block the trees, and it's going to take a certain amount of time for those trees to die. And when they do die, what's going to happen? They're going to fall down. They're going to dislodge the wetlands. It's going to make an impact on, I think, drainage and all that good sort of thing. Plus, the neighbors are going to have to look at this thing. I was glad that the hospice agreed to give us a visual barrier, so we don't have to look in the windows of these poor folks who are passing. But what's going to happen over in that area? Even if they try to landscape it, there's just the sheer height is going to block the sun on all the different times of day. So things aren't going to grow there, and if they do grow, they're not going to grow very high. So there won't be any visual barrier. You certainly can't have a fence high enough to block it. So I know that one tree was cut down at the end of Wildwood Road, and we got to look at the town barn a little bit more than we ever did before. And, that sort of thing, and I agree with Kerry Choi because he's on our street. That's one of the reasons we live here, is because it's a natural town. It's got the Blue Hills and the nature that goes along with that, and I'd hate to see that all be really damaged in an irreplaceable way. So I agree with everything that's been said so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate your presence and your comments. Is there anybody else present this evening who'd like to be heard in this public session of the board? Okay, so you didn't, yes, sir, come on up.
My name's Richard Keenan. I moved here in 1960.
Where do you live, Mr. Keenan?
Helen Ave,
You have a number for us?
43.
Good. Welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Nice to meet you all. Hi there. A few observations. It's my understanding in the early to mid-60s, somebody tried to develop this property that would turn down, and it would occur to me that there's a record of that and the reason for the being turned down, and it may set a precedent that you guys can rely on. Another thing, too, about the measuring for the subject of the curb cut, and to measure the limit to how many curb cuts can be, or the distance between curb cuts for the roadway. Wildwood Road at one time came out to Randolph Ave, and I don't think it'd be a stretch to find a map that shows it, where Wildwood Road had a curb cut on Randolph Ave, pretty close to where the gate that enters the town lot is now. And so when you're measuring from, Meg Street, you don't have to measure all the way up to Reedsdale. The next street, the distance is where Wildwood Road met Randolph Ave, which is now the driveway to the town yard. That was a public roadway once.
Well, I think you've attracted Mr. Mullins' attention to your comments, so I'm sure he'll take a look at it. He's an expert
Yeah, well,
with
nice to meet you all.
respect to transportation and curb cut permits.
Yeah, I think one thing about this town is it has a unique history. And if I recall, back in the 60s, somebody wanted to develop that property. I remember his name. He lived on Clifton Road. He had kids my age. I don't think they're kids anymore. But the point is...
We're not kids anymore either, sir.
There's history here. And if you know where to look for it, you can find perhaps a precedent to hang your hat on when you tell them no.
Great. Thanks for your presence and your thoughts, Mr. Cannon. Is there anybody else who wants to be heard this evening? Okay, so the record shows that there's no further person who wants to be heard at this public session. As I said before, at the June 3rd session, after we finish the evidence at that particular hearing, if there's any member of the public who wants to, who couldn't be present tonight and who wants to appear, and speak, we'll certainly give them that opportunity. And as previously said, if there's any member of the public who is unavailable tonight and on the 3rd, just send us a letter, send us an email, a communication, and we're delighted to receive that. Let me ask my colleagues, do we have any other business before this meeting? Mr. Mullen, are you content?
Content right now, yes.
Okay, Mrs. King? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to adjourn this meeting to June 3rd, I believe at 7 o'clock, if that's correct, and that's going to be at the Blute Conference Room in Milton Town Hall to hear the rest of the Mr. Lombardi's expert on the engineering issues and to hear rebuttal evidence on the traffic engineering issues, and Mr. Casciano has the opportunity to address any other issues that he heard about tonight. So thank you for coming, and we're adjourned.